Over the past few weeks, we've been looking at the phenomenon of talented young people leaving the state for opportunity elsewhere. We talked about the economic imperative to create new jobs, the challenges rural areas face, and why some young people are choosing to stay. This week, correspondent Gwyneth Dolan wraps up this four-part series with a conversation with three people who are having success with creative ways to help people thrive here.
My guests today are Zane Fisher, co-coordinator of Mix Santa Fe. Jennifer Navarez is executive director of the Community Learning Network, and Kelly Francis, who is multimedia coordinator at Meow Wolf. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Zane, I want to start with you. In this series, we've been talking about rural communities a little bit and how they are losing population, losing young people who want to move to different cities to find opportunity, jobs, education, things like that. But Santa Fe has a different dynamic going on, right? More complicated. What are the challenges that Santa Fe faces that you see in keeping talented young people there?
Right. I mean, one of the big challenges in Santa Fe is, I think it's no secret that we're sort of the expensive part of the state. So housing, right? Wages and housing. And of course, we're at a little bit of a balance point right now, not knowing what's going to happen with the campus that was traditionally the College of Santa Fe and then briefly the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. So the closing of that is a huge loss for us, especially in terms of talent and ingenuity and creativity. All of the faculty there getting sucked out into other communities that are waiting for them with welcoming arms. So that's a big challenge.
So Mix Santa Fe is an organization that was started by city government?
It was, sort of started by Kate Noble, brought it to the fore in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce to try to, at the beginning, professional networking for young people, and then more as triage when in the 2008 crisis, we were seeing a lot of companies, including Thornburg, being impacted, and these were high-wage jobs, younger professionals. How do we keep them in the community?
So what was Mix trying to do to keep them there? What's the secret, Zane?
Well, the first secret was like a free drink. Or what we wanted to do is make professional networking that wasn't tiresome, didn't have soggy food or weird name tags or anything like that. But the idea was to trick people into becoming engaged in their community. So we did offer people a free drink as they came in. We had a DJ, things that your normal networking events don't necessarily always have. But we've been surveying people as they come in about what are the challenges they see in their community. And we've been doing that for 8 years now. So we have this vast collection of data, and the trick is not just asking them about the challenges, but also saying, okay, well, this is what you said is wrong. How are you going to make it right, and how can we support you in doing that? So getting people engaged in their communities and working to develop the kind of new and exciting things that'll keep them around.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute and ask you more about what your surveys have showed what's wrong and what's right.
Yeah.
But Jennifer, I want to, speaking of technology and data, this is one of those fields that people always tell us, oh, New Mexico has so much potential. You know, they can do solo work, they can, working online, as long as we have this broadband, we can do so much tech here. We don't have to manufacture anything. We don't have to have this infrastructure. And we have seen some progress. But what is holding us back from doing more tech here?
I would actually sum it up in 4 things. One would be access still. Hate to say it, but the latest stats say that we're 48th in the nation for access and speed. And I think they said that's about on par with Iraq. So we have a lot of work to do, but there is great interest and momentum in the states looking into that. Besides access, education, that's absolutely key. A lot of young people don't know that this is an option still. And a lot of our schools, believe it or not, are not teaching computer science. It's not even counted as a core curriculum. So we can do some things policy-wise to support stronger computer science education. But then there's cool things like cultivating coders. One of our training partners is right now out in rural parts of the state teaching high school students to be software developers in an 8-week boot camp. So it shortens The training period accelerates the intensity, but they literally graduate as junior software developers. And they keep the laptop they used in class so they're ready to keep working or learning. And so taking education into those communities where there's a gap. The other two would be enterprise development. And I think that that is a big one because we have so many small operations, much like Fueled by Mix and other entities going on that we don't know about. So the fourth is awareness. Our community just doesn't know. And that's why we joined TechHire, the national initiative to grow our economy and strengthen it, on December 1st. We're just getting started in northern New Mexico. But we started nmtechworks.com to begin mapping all this and to start to show who's doing what and what cool things are happening. Because there's small operations as well as large ones underway that are amazing.
What's the fourth one?
That was it.
Oh.
Awareness.
Awareness,
Yep.
right. Speaking of cool things happening, Meow Wolf is the cool thing that everyone knows is happening right now. But, you know, I don't think people realize how much technology is behind it. And you are someone who came from LA in order to help bring that together. What's your job at Meow Wolf?
My job at Meow Wolf, the reason I was brought in, and it's rare that they hire from outside of New Mexico because there's a lot of honor and pride in hiring locally, and there's great synergy between Meow Wolf and the colleges and volunteer programs, and there's an internship program that we're getting ready to launch here pretty soon, and different kinds of incubators for skills within New Mexico. So it was really rare, and it was a 12-month process before they brought me on board, but they were having trouble finding the expertise that they needed. I've been working for 8 years in downtown Los Angeles on some really major large-scale installations. And traversing between entertainment and art, which we don't see globally very much. And that matched perfectly with, you know, my interests to be working in cutting-edge technology that's intertwined with the arts, but with, you know, a community. And through development in downtown Los Angeles, our community had become fragmented because of the way that gentrification happened there. And so I migrated to Santa Fe in a heartbeat when Meow Wolf offered the position. And now I'm working to help organize and cultivate the managerial aspect in combining the technology with the art, which makes more room for the artists and the technologists here to do what they like to do without getting bogged down with the administrative.
Because it takes a lot to put on Meow Wolf. There's art, there's craftsmanship, there is technology, there's management, which nobody ever thinks about, right? But in terms of human capital, Meow Wolf wants to grow, it wants to expand. What does Meow Wolf need in terms of human capital in order to grow here?
When I came on board, there were 70 employees, and there's 140 now. Just last night, actually, City Council finally voted to approve $250,000 of funding, and that coupled with the state comes to $1.1 million in funding towards the purchase of a manufacturing building. It was formerly the Caterpillar Tractor Factory. It's on the south side, which could use some economic stimulation. And this factory is about to become a massive manufacturing headquarter for many of the artworks and pieces that will then be trucked out to other states and other projects.
So you're going to build giant robots and mushrooms and housing.
We're in the process of building giant robots and mushrooms. We've got 26 room being installed in a hotel in Las Vegas. Production's underway already, and it'll be trucked out from Santa Fe to Las Vegas in September. And we have 6 of these amazing huts with interactive technology being fabricated and trucked off to Oregon. And it takes the welders, the carpenters, a whole slew of artists, you know, creative studios alone. The production portion of Meow Wolf right now is about 80 people strong. And in exchange for the funding that was received from New Mexico, Meow Wolf is promising 250 to 300 jobs within the next 4 years, with an average of $46,000 annual salary, and they hope to double that within 10, if not more.
It would be hard to say to places like Roswell or Farmington, all you need is a group of weirdos with a vision.
And a warehouse.
And a warehouse. So I want to ask all of you together, Santa Fe has a unique flavor to it and a unique economy. There are a lot of tourists who deposit dollars there, other kinds of visitors, part-time residents, retirees, people who are interested in philanthropy, interested in supporting education and supporting art. That's a huge benefit that Santa Fe has that a lot of other places don't. But what have you discovered in Santa Fe that you think other communities could take away in order to create an environment where creative young people can grow and prosper?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing is to trust a little bit in a big vision, right? And to be willing to pursue something. I think that's an important lesson that Meow Wolf brings to Santa Fe as well as other communities. It might not be, trust this group that you're not sure about, but it took really having a vision and wanting to carry through with it, and it being something that a lot of your mainstream folks are going to be a little bit skeptical of, but in this case have really come around. So the idea that we can do something that is out of the ordinary, that is a little bit audacious, is something that every community should be willing to embrace, right? Especially if they feel like they're slowly withering. I mean, why not go for it? But another thing that we have is the ability to really tap into a great amount of sort of mentorship and raw community. And when I think about the Caterpillar building that Meow Wolf is going to, and the Caterpillar building was really outfitted, again, with some economic development help for a company called Clean Air Systems, which then sold that to Caterpillar. And the previous owner of Clean Air Systems is one of the most active entrepreneurial mentors in the city and the state. He goes around, he helps people who are starting new businesses because he's got a passion for it, and he was able to be a successful entrepreneur here. So
Mentorship is definitely something
Yeah.
we've talked about before.
yeah.
Jennifer?
I would similarly second that, but in our case, there's an interesting capacity to do things that's right under our nose. And I think, one, we have a small pilot project called Love Where We Live, where students are learning digital skills, how to build a website, how to blog, how to take creative photos, how to create a gallery, but celebrating their own community and connecting. So, taking the students to the mayor's office, and the mayor looked at us, he said, this is the first group of students that have every one of them looked me in the eye and shook my hand. We worked on that. So there's soft skills that go with it, but we're weaving them together. Who's around the corner? What are they doing? How do they do it? How do we document it? Create their own website to tell the story, so they're building all those skills. And they're building connections, and they're building a sense of belonging. So, but the digital skills, which is important, there are enterprises you can develop if you just have a great idea and a little bit of training on how to build a website, how to do an online store, how to make an app. There are young people making apps. They're starting businesses.
So we need vision and guts, mentorship, and
enterprise support.
and support. Yeah.
And I think just in that regard, in our community, you can start a small business online with a lot less overhead than you need to start a mortar and brick facility. And I think encouraging, supporting, and training people to do that gives us a leg up, because a little bit of money in some of our communities and families goes a long way.
We have 1 minute left, Kelly.
Sure.
What do you want to see more of in New Mexico in order to help Meow Wolf grow here?
Oh boy, I think what I'm seeing is Meow Wolf getting everything they could ask for right now, and in turn they're hiring on people that have been here for many generations to be living out the careers that they love doing, and that exists rarely around the world.
So you just need more people with the guts who've been mentored, who have creativity and want to work.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
Empower networks. It's all about us connecting with each other and finding ways to do that. That's what makes this grow.
More things like Mix, where you bring young people together, show them that there is a community, that they are connected to it, that's one of the reasons they would want to stay, because young people told us they want to
Absolutely.
stay for friends.
Mix, Meow Wolf, TechWorks,
It's all intertwined.
they're all networks.
Thank all three of you for coming in and talking to us about this today.
Thank you, Gwyneth.
Thanks.